What year is it? Star Wars' downward spiral can be traced all the way back to the May of 1999 and the release of The Phantom Menace, which many fans attribute as the kiss of death for the brand. Just a few weeks prior, a different sci-fi franchise had sprung to life.
It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth.
The Matrix made itself known as the surprise of the year. It burst out of the gates, setting the box office record for an April release. For a film that was only sparingly marketed, its meteoric success had seemingly come out of nowhere. Lead actor Keanu Reeves was mostly unknown at the time. Even less known were the film's enigmatic directors, the Wachowskis. Whoever they were, they'd captured lightning in a bottle. Audiences were being drawn in by nothing more than pure intrigue. The Matrix packed the theaters for one simple reason. No one had ever seen anything like it.
I think it's something that's never been seen before, and I'm really excited to see it.
Oh, come on, man, it's the Matrix. This thing is blazing, man. The movie's starting. This thing is ridiculous. The Wachowskis, I mean, they're just incredible filmmakers. They are the future of this industry, man.
Matrix would go on to become the most influential science fiction movie of the decade.
For those reasons, it has been added to the National Film Registry for preservation. Its first sequel was also a commercial success, becoming the highest-grossing R-rated film in history.
It was ambitious, innovative, and salient. It pioneered such revolutionary techniques in filmmaking that its influence is still felt today. The superhero genre alone, which The Matrix ironically helped inspire, has ballooned to fill up nearly half of all blockbusters released. At the end of the day, both Star Wars and The Matrix tell a similar story. They offer us tales of a great hero rebelling against oppressive machinery.
Star Wars, Jay. Luke Skywalker is Neo. Neo is you. And you're going through it with Neo.
Nothing. I'm all right.
Sentinels. How long?
5, maybe 6 minutes.
Death Star will be in range in 5 minutes.
What is he doing?
He's beginning to believe.
He is the one with the magic power who is able to shoot the proton torpedo into the hole and blow up the Death Star when everyone else fell.
Star Wars was eventually tempted to the dark side. The Matrix remained defiant.
The thing about The Matrix that separates it from basically any franchise ever is that its universe lends itself to endless storytelling possibilities.
But what truly set The Matrix apart from the competition was its philosophical depth. For many, it represented the ultimate exploration of one of modern man's deepest fears. The year 1999 seems to come up a lot. I have come to view it as this inflection point in the trajectory of modern society, after which everything seems to have taken an ominous turn for the worse. Turns out the future ain't quite what it's cracked up to be, and while dystopian visions of tomorrow were nothing new, the one presented by The Matrix is exceptionally bleak. Computers were being welcomed into people's homes, and the advent of a virtual reality was no longer a question of if, but when. The rapid acceleration of computing power began to fuel theories of a potential technological singularity on the horizon, in which super-intelligent machines could achieve godlike abilities, thus rendering all of mankind obsolete. At the same time, fictional works began to push the concept of machine warfare to its absolute limit. If a confrontation between humans and machines did arise, just how bad could things get? The Terminator franchise envisioned the human race being driven to the brink of extinction by nuclear hellfire. A somber outcome indeed, but one which many would find preferable to the scenario depicted by The Matrix. In a world where mankind has long since lost its war against the machines, human beings have been forced into a fate worse than death. A state of total submission in which our homeostatic energy is harvested to power the machine world. The collective human consciousness is imprisoned and pacified by a lifelike simulation. This premise is very much reminiscent of Plato's allegory of the cave, an age-old metaphor about the nature of truth and objectivity. It seeks to highlight philosophical enlightenment as the pathway to salvation. But of course, that's to assume that whatever's waiting for us outside the cave is actually worth the journey. Coincidentally, 1 year before the debut of The Matrix, an entirely different film had already explored the premise of escaping from a false reality. And while we never see what happens to Truman after he breaks free of the simulation, it's implied that he's gone to a better place. In The Matrix, however, the decision is not as clear. It's human nature to seek out truth, but does there come a point when the truth is so ugly that we'd be better off not knowing at all? How many of us would choose to remain in the cave if we knew the horrors that lay beyond it? Perhaps it would be better for us to simply stay put and play it safe. But the story of humanity would indicate otherwise. It goes against human nature to remain imprisoned in both a cave and a simulation, for the simple reason that it undermines our autonomy. In this way, we are distinct from both animals and machines. Human beings aren't required to behave in ways that are entirely instinctual nor logical. It's for this reason why Neo is such an engaging protagonist. His journey relies on regaining the right to choose, no matter the monumentality of the system standing in his way. Audiences couldn't help but relate to Neo's story.
Neo is you, and you're going through it with Neo.
Especially during a time when so many of us were losing our autonomy. The 90s were generally regarded as a time of idealistic optimism for the future, a sentiment which was nonetheless undercut by the ominous feeling that something was not quite right, that the so-called free society we were inhabiting didn't exactly come as advertised. There's a scene in The Matrix where Agent Smith explains why the machines chose to simulate the year 1999. He describes it as the peak of civilization. Obviously, the setting was intended to match the contemporary release of the film, but it's eerie to look back on that line today and realize just how true it still rings. While the machines canonically intended to pass off the year 1999 as a convincing reality, it ironically marked a point when everything started to feel artificial. The late 20th century saw the rise of a different kind of machine, the corporate machine. Financial behemoths whose influence grew to rival the most dominant empires in history. These man-made entities have very much become the monolithic overlords of the present day, and they've been actively twisting the reality around us. It was hard to notice at first. Everything seemed so normal, but eventually, the anomalies just became too much to ignore. Despite all the concerns of machines acting like us, no one could anticipate just how much we would start acting like machines. If that was ever the case, we surely haven't seen any of it. In fact, there's an argument to be made that the average person today is doing more work than at any other time in recent history. Simultaneously, the nature of that work has only become more robotic and dehumanizing. The ruthless efficiency of the labor market has rendered individuality almost worthless. You either fit into the preordained system or you don't. Either way, you're just another cog. The fruits of your labor serve no greater philosophical purpose. You can't help but get a little existential when it feels like everything you do is meaningless. It's a feeling that now extends far beyond the office cubicle. The relentless thirst for profit has expanded to pervade nearly all walks of life. Much like the fate of humans in The Matrix, modern consumers are created and harvested to feed some inescapable system that we will never comprehend. And although we found ourselves with no shortage of things to buy, it's somewhat shocking just how limited our options have become pretty much everywhere else. If you've ever wanted to experience how it feels to be in The Matrix, look no further than the very industry from which it came.
If you're a millennial, think of something from your childhood. Is there a movie or show reboot of it? Because I'm hard-pressed to find anything I can answer no to. The list gets pretty depressing as you near the bottom of the barrel. Chips, Baywatch, Battleship, G.I. Joe, Power Rangers, and a hexology of Transformers movies with more to come. If you went back in time and told the world that 50% of our movies would be based on toys, they would probably just hit the button and end it.
It seems like these days, everything has to be a franchise. Because while a standalone film is limited to its moment in the sun, a cinematic universe can be milked until the sun stops shining. Why allow something to die when you can keep it in a perpetual state of suspended animation, siphoning off every last drop of whatever made it so alive in the first place? 2019 marked 20 years since the release of The Matrix, and much had changed since then. Keanu Reeves moved on to an entirely new action franchise. The Wachowski brothers were now the Wachowski sisters, and the film industry had mutated into an almost unrecognizable wasteland. Gone were the days of the ambitious auteurs who defined Hollywood's greatest hits. Modern blockbusters now view ambition as an unnecessary risk. Turns out that film studios had become 20 years smarter at making movies profitable. The first Matrix film wound up making Warner Bros. Nearly $500 million at the box office, which was almost 8 times their initial investment. This remarkable financial success makes it all the more baffling to consider that had it been pitched today, The Matrix would have probably never been made. I mean, if you really think about it, when was the last time any major Hollywood studio rolled the dice on an unproven concept? Could an R-rated blockbuster with such esoteric themes even exist nowadays? Cinemas used to be some place you'd go to witness something truly spectacular, but lately, every aspect of the industry has been on a steady march towards mediocrity. Twitter user Eric Krebs helped visualize the stark decline of originality in Hollywood. It's now common for the top 10 grossing films of the year to be entirely composed of recycled concepts from pre-existing source material. The number of R-rated films has been gutted to make way for the far more marketable PG-13, a format which neuters the filmmaker's ability to explore sophisticated ideas. The once promising field of computer graphics now comes off far more as a crutch for overworked productions who can't be bothered to compose an actual scene. The Hollywood simulation is now almost entirely dependent on machines, and the results are just as uninspiring as you may have guessed. It seems like every big-budget film today, no matter who directed it or which studio backed it, now looks like the same bland and homogeneous visual sludge. There is a disturbing lack of humanity in modern-day blockbusters. Creative control has been wrestled away from filmmakers and placed in the hands of bureaucratic committees, who audit every decision in the production process over its financial sensibility. Anything remotely nuanced or edgy is generally not advisable. Movies are now expected to be international events, and should in no way touch on any issues that may marginally offend anyone on the opposite side of the globe. For an industry once renowned for its limitless possibilities, it's disheartening to see so much of cinema now defined by what you can't do. The craft of filmmaking has been streamlined from an art to a science. Major releases no longer feel like an organic exercise in creativity. They feel like the product of a heavily controlled formula. Much like a roller coaster, they're designed to offer the impression of a dire situation, while all along you were never in any real danger. After it's all said and done, you always wind up right back where you started. You haven't really gone anywhere. Why allow the heroes to fail? Why allow a fan-favorite character to truly die? Why allow the guy to not get the girl in the end? Sure, doing so might produce a moment that's actually meaningful, but that would imply that movies can tell a story that's even remotely complex. It's as if Hollywood is no longer capable of producing stories which are actually satisfying. They instead come off as a disparate patchwork of amusement with very little substance or cohesion holding anything together. It's like going to a restaurant expecting a gourmet meal and getting served a plate of candy. Sure, it sets off all the right receptors, but rather than making you feel full, it just makes you sick. And the sickening sweetness of movies today is delivered through meaningless nostalgia, assaulting the audience with a nauseating barrage of familiar faces, places, and sounds.
It's honestly a little bit worrying that across 17 films and shows in Phase 4, your best product was a film that showcased the worst and laziest tropes of Hollywood today. Not to mention it's actually more Sony's film than anything. The unapologetic nostalgia of No Way Home was pretty hard to not get wrapped up in. But when such a cheap move is your best product, that should set off serious alarm bells. So Phase 4 as a whole, a complete and utter shit show, with some stuff that was decent. But most of it, on average, was just mid as hell.
Have you seen Spider-Man Far From Home? Or whatever the new one is?
No. Home Sweet Home.
Home Sweet Home Alone?
Yeah, I have not.
But that's, or Ghostbusters Afterlife.
Did you watch the new Spider-Man?
No, I'm just saying, like, that's what they're commenting on.
Yeah, people
everything now is, it's the same shit we always criticize, where you're just, like, regurgitating member berries.
Yes.
Anti-Ghostbusters Afterlife.
Yeah.
It's the exact, and it's funny because I've seen reactions to this where people are like, remember The Matrix? Remember? And it's like, no.
It's not that.
It's not that. Let's kind of do something that's more commenting on not just those movies, but the recent trend of nostalgia-driven reboot.
Studios now go so far as to resurrect the dead just to keep the same old song and dance going, as part of some desperate ploy to remind us of a time when movies actually made us feel something. Some of us aren't fooled, however. We know that we're not living in 1999 anymore, and recognize the product on screen as a hollow imitation, only resembling the original superficially. Just like a machine, it has no soul, and it replaced whatever was alive long ago. Such is the fate of the modern franchise. It happened to Star Wars. The pool of original ideas has dried up. Hollywood has determined that it's now far more cost-effective to simply regurgitate existing brands from a bygone era. While the uninitiated may feel excited to reunite with that special friend, it's important to realize what exactly made it so special in the first place. Surely it wasn't geriatric celebrities trying and failing to relive the glory days, nor was it a bubble-wrapped and sanitized retelling of a story we've already heard before. How about the nonsensical addition of a marketable character whose only purpose is to drive toy sales? If you ask me, the vast majority of rebooted franchises would have been far better off staying dead. They aren't interested in selling a quality product. All they're selling is a legacy. A legacy which stands to be actively tarnished by whatever vapid slop is being pumped out today. But what can I say? There's a reason why shameless pandering sequels continue to flood the market. People keep paying to see them. It's almost as if modern consumers have been conditioned to accept nothing more, to be content with middling disappointment. Reboots have become inevitable.
The problem here. They pumped out endless content with the idea of a shared cinematic universe, so you feel like you need to keep up with it all, for most things to literally mean nothing in the overarching context of the MCU anyway. The very idea of a cinematic universe is that you can watch everything that comes out because it's connected. This was easy and fun to do in the Infinity Saga because there wasn't an oversaturation. Because of that, each project felt like it had more thought put into it, therefore a better end product. Phase 1 of the MCU had 6 films. Phase 2 had 6 films. Phase 3 had 11 films. So 3 phases and 23 films in 11 years. Not a bad ratio. But Phase 4 had 17 films and shows in less than 2 years. Think about that for a second. 17 films and shows in less than 2 years. And people wonder why the quality bar of the MCU has dropped so dramatically. The amount of content in the entire MCU since its start in 2008 nearly doubled within less than 2 years. This is the very definition of oversaturation. Not to mention, despite having an overabundance of content, it failed to progress any overarching narrative. 6 films in earlier phases sent the overall story so much further despite having only a fraction of the films to do so. I mean, it just felt like the Infinity Saga was the main course and Phase 4 is the leftovers, and there's a lot of fucking leftovers. Now look, the comic book genre has been hammered to death in the past decade or so, we know this, but there was absolutely no focus. Character inconsistencies, character assassinations, oversaturation, all of this put a ton of pressure on the next phase of the MCU, that being Phase 5, where we are right now, which takes us onto Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania.
Ants! Ants!
So the Ant-Man films of the past, they were very ground level in nature, but now in Phase 5, it's got the entire weight of the MCU on its shoulders. It's got to deal with the baggage of the wasted time in Phase 4, and does it handle it? No, it really doesn't. Scott Lang is not Cap, he's not Iron Man, he's not Thor, he's not Doctor Strange. Ant-Man works in the context of the smaller films, the ground level, low stakes outings. And when it comes to the ensemble films, he works well as a supporting character. Ant-Man films are supposed to be the palate cleanser from the big MCU movies, not the savior of the entire damn franchise. So there is that part of me that's going a little bit easier on this film because it's receiving the after effects of Phase 4. Honestly, a little bit worrying that across 17 films and shows in Phase 4, your best product was a film that showcased the worst and laziest tropes of Hollywood today.
The superhero genre alone, which The Matrix ironically helped inspire, has ballooned to fill up nearly half of all blockbusters released.
Neo is you, and you're going through it with Neo.